Later on, you go and convert it and get it published. But mine was the opposite. I had a contract from Random House to write the book, even before I got to State University of New York, the American Studies program. So I was there, I was writing the book for Random House. So when I finished the book, Random House published it, and there was I think some bureaucratic delay because it was a new program. So whereas the administration was waiting to do whatever they were doing, I had to go back and say, look, I have to move on. I can't be waiting for this. So that was when I went back and talked to the relevant deans and told them, look, here's my dissertation. It's been published. Where's my PhD?
And they gave it to you?
Well, it was already been approved. It was just that it was stuck in the pipeline, the bureaucratic pipeline.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, they had to hurry up and give it to me, dig it up from wherever it was.
But the title of that, and it has a very long title, so permit me, I have to read it, became The West and the Rest of Us, White Predators, Black Slaves, and the Rest of Us. Did I get that right?
Black Slavers.
Black Slavers.
Yeah.
And the Rest of Us. That's a very long title for a book.
Well, the title is The West and the Rest of Us. The rest is a subtitle.
Okay. And what was the core message that you sought to put out in this particular book?
Well, the basic issue is, at that point in the history of the world was divided between the West and everybody else. Hence the West and the rest of us. So what the book was trying to do was to explore the relationship between the West and the rest of us in the world. And the subtitle had to deal with the particular relationship between us and the West, going back to the period of the Maafa, or the so-called transatlantic slave trade. You had the white slave traders, you had the blacks enslavers who facilitated their job. So basically, I was drawing attention to the relationship, which still continues, between the West and the black elites of today. They are no different from those of the slaving era.
You don't think there's been a change? There's been improvements in the relationships?
Well, I'll give you an example of the improvement. In that period, the whites came to sell us trinkets, gunpowder, and pots and pans. Now they sell us SUVs, they sell us Hummers, they sell us all kinds of new gadgets. The essential relationship remains the same. They set the prices for everything we buy. We can't even set the prices for what we sell them because they control the international markets. So that has not changed. And my point is that until we change that relationship, our situation is not going to improve in the world. All the people who have developed themselves in the world have done so by tackling that relationship and changing it. So that is something that your generation has to begin to face up to. That if you want to improve your situation of black people in the world, you must pay attention to the essential relationship in which we are caught up and we've been trapped in for over 5 centuries. If you don't pay attention to that, you can bluster, condemn the imperialists, do whatever you like, but you'll be stuck where you are.
But you've also said that for Africa to thrive and get to where you are talking about, we should have stripped away all colonial structures and rebuilt our own. Was that feasible?
I think the question is, is this what needs to be done?
But how can that be done when the people who led that fight were almost all trained from the West, basically?
Well, that's one view of the matter. It doesn't matter where you were trained.
Does that not influence you?
It does influence you, but the question is, all kinds of things influence you. But you got to know where you are going. And if you know where you are going, you can take whatever opportunities come your way to get to where you want to go. The people who got us so-called independence, yes, they were all trained in the West. So too were the people who created the Korean example, transformation of Korea or Singapore. They were all trained in the West. So that is not the issue. You have to figure out why did they do what they did, and your people didn't do what they should have done, and then what do you still need to do? What do you still need to do to get yourself out of your mess? When you approach the problem in a practical manner, then that you are trained in the West doesn't become an obstacle. People trained in the West can adapt and use the knowledge they got from the West to solve their own problems.
So we don't necessarily have to strip everything away.
Well, let's put it this way. Autonomous societies, when they want to transform, start from the base of what they have, and then take elements that they find useful from everywhere else and add on to it. The example of, say, Japan in the Meiji era illustrates that, because they had a Japanese culture and society, and when they were shaken awake to the fact that they had to modernize, they went and brought people from everywhere and learned from them and revealed Japan as a modern society. Our main difference is that we don't have autonomy anymore. So
we are independent. Almost every country on the continent is independent.
Yeah, that's, what should I call it? Flag independence. Who runs your countries?
African leaders.
They have black-face fronts for those who run your country.
You do not believe that these are people who are running the country for Africans, on African values, on African philosophies?
Nope.
You don't believe so?
I can show you that they are not.
Show me.
Okay, fine. Do you know what happens with our budgets? How is your budget arrived at in any of these African countries? There are constraints which are dictated by external forces, and your governments have to obey those constraints, or there'll be no aid given to them to run their countries. You don't produce enough to run your countries on your own. This is why you have all these aid groups, foreign assistance of all kinds, because you need them to balance your budget. So because they have the purse string, they can dictate what you do and you don't do. But you are there, the elected president, so long as you are obedient, they'll keep you there to keep doing what they tell you. When you are disobedient, you get into trouble, like Babo in Côte d'Ivoire. He offended the French interests. So they got Ouattara to come in and replace him.
Hasn't done such a bad job, has he?
I'm not saying whether he's done a good job. I'm saying when you offend the powers that actually control your so-called independence, that's what gets to happen.
Okay.
You'll get booted out, either in a rigged election or by a coup, and a more obedient servant will be brought in to replace you. To the populace, you are their leader, but you are their leader on sufferance to the big powers. The United Nations runs all these countries. Their agencies run all our countries because they dictate the policies and make sure you follow them. And they have the purse string on you. If you want to be independent, you must produce enough and sell enough to be economically self-independent. If you don't have that independence, whoever lends you the balance of what you need to balance your economy can dictate what you do or don't do.
There are those who have said that for us to perhaps get this level, we require one African country to get to what we term a G8 rank of sorts. Is that a possibility you see? Is that the way forward?
Well, let's put it this way. If you go back to Marcus Garvey's formulation of the issue, he was saying that black people in the world cannot be respected in the world by the other races until they do what the other races have done that gave them respect. You can't go and beg for respect. You can't beg for whatever it is, because whoever gives you equality can remove it whenever he wants. So if you want the respect of the world, you must develop the appropriate power that gains the respect. Or to put it in a crude way that I think it was LBJ who put it, Homesy American way. if you build your power to the point where you are sitting out there, you are powerful, the more powerful people will have to reckon with you. And the logic would be that it's better to have you inside with them pissing out than outside pissing in. And that's what North Korea is doing. They have the nuclear weapons. They are threatening everybody because you are keeping them out. So ultimately, America has to understand that you aren't going to remove its nuclear weapons, so bring them officially into the nuclear club. So if you want respect, whether it's economic or military respect, you better develop your own capacity.
Okay. There's been talk of an Africa rising over the past 5-6 years or so. Is that a concept that you buy into, that Africa indeed is rising? Or this is, again, a Western makeup?
Where's the evidence that you're rising?
Economies are improving, countries are growing faster, populations are growing.
Well, growth is not development. To go back to that issue, growth is not development. Your economies can grow and grow, but they are not developing. You can eat and eat, but if you don't transform it into your structures, all you are doing is, do you know how much they rip us off of that growth you talk about? How much of it do you retain? How much of it do you plow into your structural integration of your economy? So you can have growth, but if you don't transform it into industrialization and development, you never get to the point where you are a major power in the world.
And you wrote a sequel to that book, Decolonizing the African Mind. And you looked at, again, different concepts of colonization. What was left out in the first part that you felt you had to add in the second one?
No. It's not a question of what was left out. It was a question of saying, if you are going to do what you need to do, you have to do some mental house cleaning. You don't take somebody who is been made crazy and set him out to go and do things that it requires sanity to do. And part of our problem is that we have not attended to that aspect of our history, where we don't understand that we are basically all misbehaving. Some African American, well, two examples. Malcolm X put it in the following way, that he doesn't know of any African American, no matter who he is, who has not been damaged by the experience of the black people at the hands of the whites. An African American psychologist puts it differently. He says we're all living in what he called pathological normalcy.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Well, it's a very technical but very important. In other words, the average black person looks normal, but his normality is pathological. In other words, what is normal for black people is not the same as what is normal for other people. If other people behave that way, they'd be considered crazy. So the normalcy we accept in other people's, when compared with other people's, is a version of craziness. So until you get rid of that pathological normalcy, you aren't going to get anywhere.
And for you, what do you consider at the moment the greatest threat to Africa moving forward, to us getting a country that is close to this GH rank, where we have the kind of development and proper independence that you're talking about?
Well, the threat is everywhere. Most of it is our inability to understand that we have enemies. If you don't understand that you have enemies, you can embrace your greatest enemy, run to him for assistance, and he'll just knife you. That's right. So Marcus Garvey made a point about knowing your enemy is an essential part of being educated. So most black people, if you ask them, do you have any enemies? They can't see any sign of it. And when you tell them, what of the West? They say, what are you talking about? these guys who are development partners, who produce all these things that we buy, who are so nice to us. They brought us civilization. They brought us Christianity, this, that, and that. What are you talking about when you say we have enemies? The fact is that they refuse to recognize the essential relationship between us and them. And so long as they don't recognize that, they will not behave appropriately. And I'll give you an example. What does the word abrofo mean?
White people.
That is an incorrect definition. Yes. The same with ayevuto, and the same with what's the guy equivalent. The point is, when you break it down etymologically, what does abro mean? Let's start from there.
Okay, so basically, there's a negative connotation. I don't know how to explain the word abro, but basically a cheat, sort of.
Well, you're along the correct lines. All I'm pointing out to you is that we've lost the meaning. Your ancestors gave you severe warning so that when you enter into relationship with certain people, you'll be on the alert. When they coined those names for them, that was the message they were giving you through the language. But over the last, I don't know how long, people have come around to use it just as a label. So they don't reflect about what the message is. If you know that somebody, that this is a snake, you don't behave, you have to adapt yourself to a snake behavior. If you know that somebody is a fox, you adapt your behavior to that fact. But if you forget that message about the character, then you'll behave differently. And I'll give you a graphic example. In Kwame Nkrumah's time, Ghanaians were importing all kinds of things to help development. Some Eastern European country supplied what they called farm tractors. Now, when they were brought here, they were found to be snow plows. Now, you couldn't use them, right?
Yeah.
Now, one question is, if Ghanaians at that point were aware of the meanings of abrofo and all the other terms, they would have shined their eyes. So when you start making contracts with people, you make sure you check everything along the way. You could have sent pre-shipment inspectors to guarantee that what they were sending you were what was written in the contract. It's not when they have arrived and they've taken their money. So by forgetting the meanings of certain words, that's part of our craziness.
Oh, okay. I hope you're enjoying the conversation with Chinweizu. I'm definitely learning a new thing. I'm being schooled on my own language here, but I hope we are all being schooled. Now, when we return, we'll talk Nigerian politics.